And joining us on the broadcast is Mehdi Sharifi, British Iranian journalist and writer based in London. Mr. Sharifi, appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. Situation, of course, remains volatile in Israel as well as Iran. How do you see the situation panning out as both Iran and Israel continue to trade heavy fire as we speak?
Well, things are looking really bleak right now. Recently, we've had reports of Israel targeting government sites in Iran, including the foreign ministry compound. Now, we know Israel started this on Friday when it, out of the blue, decided to strike Iran ahead of nuclear talks that Iran had with the US that is now sabotaged, and it was meant to take place today. The court is ultimately in the ball is in Israel's court. Iran's foreign ministry made it very clear yesterday that once Israel stops the strikes, Iran will also stop in retaliation. But right now, as I said, things are getting bleak, and it's not just between Iran and Israel, but the wider region. And we even have Iraqi paramilitary groups such as Kataib Hezbollah have now come out and threatened the US that they will resume attacks on US forces. So there is a risk of the US now being dragged into a war by Israel. And I would also like to mention earlier in your report that Israel has been striking missile sites, yes, but their strikes have also killed civilians. We have reports of up to 400 people killed in Iran and 600 wounded. And Iranians are already starting to become displaced by Israeli strikes. People are leaving the cities such as Tehran to go and seek refuge in more rural areas. And some of these buildings where the so-called IRGC commanders are also host civilians. So it's a very dark time for Iran, for the whole region, and for the West as well, because the West is also interested in nuclear diplomacy with Iran.
Yes, Ms. Sharifi, you say that Israel, Iran has an upper hand, but let's not discount the fact that at least 14 civilians have lost their lives in Israel as well. But talking about the upcoming G7 summit that is to take place in Canada, what role do you think the G7 leaders can play when it comes to the Israel-Iran conflict? And how do you see them pressing Donald Trump when it comes to the US stand as far as the conflict is concerned?
Yes, so Europe's standpoint is fairly mono. They are also concerned by Iran's nuclear capabilities, but they also are interested in nuclear talks, and they have all been pressing for de-escalation in this conflict. No one wants to see any escalation. And so they will probably be pressuring Trump to get back on the negotiation tables. That is ultimately what will happen, because as I mentioned earlier, a wider conflict is in nobody's interest. And if we're talking about potential regime change, that is not going to come about by bombing people into freedom. We need diplomacy and peace right now. That's the European standpoint.
Yes. And also, Ms. Sharifi, to add here, Emmanuel Macron has said that there is a possible calm in the next few hours. But given that strikes are happening from both the sides, do you see that as a possibility in the near term?
I believe European leaders, they have a pivotal role in terms of the fact that they are allies with Israel and can be a voice of reason. But as we've seen in the past 2 years, Israel doesn't always succumb to the European demands. And that's something we cannot predict. We would just have to wait and see how things span out. But we would hope that they will be able to play an important role in de-escalating things. And as you mentioned earlier, civilians are also dying in Israel, and this region really does not need any more wars.
Yes, and with both sides trying to reign supremacy over each other, important to mention here the sites that have been hit in Iran. Your thoughts on the military facilities that have been hit in Iran, one, and also the senior commanders who've lost their lives as a result of Israeli airstrikes in Iran.
Yes, of course. And as I'd also like to just repeat, some of these sites where they have targeted commanders, there are also civilians. One of my friends, her cousin lived in an apartment building where an IRGC commander also happens to live. She's not an IRGC commander, she's not a nuclear scientist, and her building still got bombed. However, I'd like to also mention that this war is going to be different. None of us can predict what's going to happen because it's not like the war Israel has been fighting with Gaza. Gaza is an occupied enclave with no military. It's a few guerrilla men with rockets. We're talking about an Iranian state, a country that's humongous, significant manpower, and they do have the weapons. I can't say they're more sophisticated than Israel's weapon. Israel definitely has advanced weapons. They get it from America, the world's top military power. But again, this goes down to why people in the region and across the world are scared.
Yes. Just last question before we let you go, Ms. Sharifi. Situation is volatile not just in Israel and Iran, but West Asia as a whole. Specifically also talking about the US bases in the West Asia region. Talk to us about how precarious the situation is when it comes to these US air bases in West Asia as a whole.
I believe right now Iran is being strategic because earlier on they did threaten American bases, but they haven't struck them just yet. I think Iran will be moving very strategically. However, the American bases are an absolute red line for Trump. He's made that very clear. However, Trump's also interested in peace. He's like the #1 ambassador for American first. He doesn't want to drag America to any foreign wars. But as I mentioned, the American bases are a red flag for the US. And I'd like to also mention some of them are in Iraq. And as we know, Iran still has very close ties to Iraq. And there are militia groups inside Iraq that are probably prepared to attack on behalf of Iran.
Yes, Ms. Sharifi, I'd like to take another question from you. You spoke about the US bases, but also if you can talk to us about how Donald Trump has accepted that US knew about this operation of Israel, but US was not a part of this operation. How do you see that statement going forward? Because Iran has issued a very stern warning to US as well, given that it says that US was very much a part of this operation by the Israeli forces.
Yeah, I wouldn't go into too much he says, she says. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Iran is very strategic. Unless America poses a direct threat to them, I don't think they would just recklessly attack America because we need to talk about military imbalance as well. America is the top military power in the world. And I think that's why at the moment they've been avoiding military bases because they know how America will react. And Iran is also interested in nuclear diplomacy. Iran is under crippling sanctions and they're not doing very well. The government, we've seen the protests that have been happening, I mean, at any moment, the public could mobilize against the government. So they're in quite a fragile state and it wouldn't be in their interest at all to attack America. But of course, because of what Israel's done, it's quite humiliating on a state level. So it does make sense for them to kind of spew out these kind of stern warnings and rhetorics, but I would take them at face value until we see action that aligns with it. But as we've seen in recent days with Iran, it doesn't respond immediately. It waits a few days because at the beginning, it did throw missiles, but we saw injuries, but now we've seen like civilians killed. We've seen like the missiles have intercepted Israel's Iron Dome defense systems. So as we can see, Iran is very calculative and we cannot predict its next move. We just have to wait and see.
Yes, while the future is uncertain, of course, let's not discount the fact that these are civilians who are having to pay the brunt of it all. Appreciate you for your time, Ms. Sharifi.
Thank you so much.